you already own it. $2 at the hardware store, a blue and green box that has sat in American cupboards for over 130 years. And the bugs eating your tomatoes, the ants in your pantry, the grubs killing your lawn, they have no defense against it. None. Because the big garden brands cannot sell you a $40 bottle of something you can buy for pocket change. So, they would rather you never learned what my grandfather taught me before I could read. I'm going to give you 11 ways the plain people have used plain old borax in the garden and around the home. And the last one, the 11th, is the one almost nobody outside our community has ever heard spoken out loud. It is the reason I am making this video. Stay with me till the end. Before we start, tell me down in the comments what state you are gardening in and what pest is winning the war this year. Slugs, squash bugs, fire ants. Tell me. I read them. I still remember being maybe 7 years old, standing on a milk crate next to my mother at the kitchen sink in Lancaster County, watching her mix a little white powder into warm sugar water in a jelly jar. The ants had found the bread box. By morning, the trail was gone. She did not buy a thing. She just knew. That powder was borax, sodium tetraborate, a mineral pulled out of dry lake beds in Death Valley, California since the 1880s. The University of California Agriculture and Natural Resources Program has published research confirming that low-dose borax baits can wipe out entire ant colonies within 72 hours when the workers carry it back to the queen. The outside world finally wrote down what the plain folk have done at the kitchen table for generations. So, let us begin. The first one is the ant colony killer my mother used, and it still works on every species I've tried it on, including those nasty Argentine ants down south. Borax does not kill the ant on contact. That is why it works. The worker tastes the sweet sugar, carries the poison home, feeds the queen and the brood, and the whole colony collapses from the inside. Mix 1 teaspoon of borax into 1 cup of warm water with a half cup of sugar. Stir it until it is clear. Soak cotton balls in it. Set them on a jar lid right where you see the trail. Do not spray the trail. Do not kill the scouts. You want them to carry it. In 3 days, the trail is gone for the season. But ants are only the beginning of what this powder will do. So, let us walk out to the garden. Number 2, slugs and snails. If you have hostas, if you have lettuce, if you have strawberries, you know the slime trail in the holes by morning. Borax draws moisture straight out of a slug's soft body the same way salt does, but it does not poison your soil the way heavy salt will. Sprinkle a thin, dry ring of borax around the base of the plant about a ½ inch wide, keeping it off the leaves and off the stem itself. Refresh after heavy rain. The slugs will not cross it. My uncle in Holmes County kept his cabbage heads whole all summer doing nothing more than this. But slugs are slow. The next problem moves fast. Number 3. Fleas in the carpet. And yes, this counts as home and garden because fleas come in from the yard on the dog. The English will sell you a $200 exterminator visit. We sprinkled fine borax into the carpet, worked it down into the fibers with a soft broom, left it 24 hours, then vacuumed it up. The borax dries out the flea eggs and larvae hiding in the pile where the chemical sprays never reach. Do this once in early summer and once in early fall. Keep pets and small children out of the room while it sits. Therefore, the cycle breaks and you stop feeding the pet store flea product machine month after month. Number 4. Cockroaches. I do not like to talk about them, but every old farmhouse gets 1 or 2, and a friend who moved to Florida tells me they are the of mice down there. Mix equal parts borax and plain white flour, or borax and powdered sugar. Dust it in a thin line behind the refrigerator, under the stove, along the back of the cupboards. The roach grooms the powder off its legs, swallows it, and is finished within a day or 2. Texas A&M Extension has documented borax baits achieving over 90% reduction in German cockroach populations in field trials. Cheap powder, real science. But roaches stay indoors. Let us go back outside because the next one is the use that saves vegetable gardens. Number 5. Boron deficiency in your soil. Now this is different from killing a pest. This is feeding the ground. Borax in tiny amounts is actually a micronutrient that beets, carrots, cauliflower, broccoli, apples, and especially tomatoes need to set fruit properly. If your cauliflower heads come out brown in the middle, if your beets are corky, if your apples are pitted, your soil is starved for boron. 1 level tablespoon of borax dissolved in 1 gallon of water sprayed evenly over 1,000 square feet of garden once a year in spring. That is it. Oregon State Extension has been recommending this exact rate for decades. Do not double it. Boron is good in whispers and toxic in shouts, but once you fix the soil, the harvest doubles. So, what about the bugs that fly? Number 6. Carpenter ants and termites in the woodpile and the porch beams. This is the one that saved my brother's barn. Mix borax with warm water until it stops dissolving. About 1 part borax to 8 parts water. Brush it or spray it onto bare, unpainted wood fence posts, the underside of the porch, the sill plates in the barn, firewood you are about to bring in. The borax soaks into the wood fibers. When a termite or carpenter ant chews it, the powder ruins their gut bacteria and they cannot digest cellulose anymore. They starve in their own tunnels. This treatment lasts for years as long as the wood stays out of driving rain. The commercial product that does the same thing costs $60 a gallon and is, I will tell you plainly, the same chemical with a fancy label. But pests are only half the battle. The other half is what is already growing. Number 7, and this is the one for those of you who wrote me saying your garden is already in, your beds are already mulched, your tomatoes are already 3 feet tall, and you think this video is only for spring planters. Listen close. You can do this Saturday morning. Powdery mildew on squash, cucumbers, and zinnias, that gray-white dust on the leaves that spreads faster than you can pick. Mix 1 teaspoon of borax and 1 tablespoon of cooking oil into 1 gallon of water. Shake it hard. Spray it on the tops and bottoms of affected leaves in the early morning before the sun hits them. The borax shifts the leaf surface to a pH the fungus cannot live on, and the oil makes it stick. 3 applications, 4 days apart. I have brought back squash vines that I was ready to pull out and burn. You do not need to start over, you just need to spray. But mildew is not the only thing creeping in. Number 8. Weeds in the cracks of the sidewalk, the driveway, the patio stones. Not in the garden beds, mind you. Borax will hurt anything green it touches, so keep it far from what you want to keep. But in cracks where nothing should grow at all, dissolve 1 1/4 cups of borax in 1 gallon of warm water and pour it right into the crack on a dry, sunny day. The crabgrass, the dandelion, the creeping Charlie gone within a week, and they stay gone for the season. My father used to do this every June around the milk house. No $40 jug of weed killer, no glove and mask, just a watering can. Therefore, you save the chemicals for nothing, because the cupboard already had the answer. Number 9. Mice in the shed and the chicken coop. Now, I am not going to tell you borax kills mice quickly, because it does not. But mice will not cross a heavy line of it the same way they will not cross a line of peppermint or steel wool. Sprinkle a generous band of borax across the threshold of the shed, around the base of the feed bins, behind the chicken feeder. The fine powder gets on their feet, they lick it off, and they decide your shed is not worth the trouble. They move on to the neighbors. I am not proud of that part, but it is honest. The grain stays in the bin, but we are getting close to the one I promised you, so stay with me one more. Number 10. Mold and mildew on the cellar walls, on the underside of the porch, on the north-facing siding, where the sun never reaches. The English buy a spray bottle of mildew remover for $9 that is mostly water. We mix 1 cup of borax into 1 quart of hot water, scrub it into the moldy spot with a stiff brush, and leave it. Do not rinse it off. The borax keeps working, drying out the spores for weeks afterward. My grandmother did the cellar steps every April, 87 years old when she passed, and her cellar never smelled like a cellar. It smelled like clean stone. And now, the 11th, the one I have been holding back. This is the one almost no one outside the plain communities knows, and I only learned it because my wife's father, a beekeeper and orchard man up near Sugar Creek, Ohio, sat me down on a hickory stump one September afternoon and told me the use is for codling moth, the worm in the apple, the single worst pest of home orchards in America. The reason your apples have that brown tunnel running to the core. Every garden catalog will sell you pheromone traps for $15 each, sticky bands, sprays that cost $30 a bottle and have to go on 7 times a season. Here is what we do instead, and I want you to write this down. In late winter, before the buds break, late February in the south, late March up north, you take a heavy paintbrush and you make a thick paste of borax and warm water, about the consistency of cream. You paint a wide band of it around the trunk of the apple tree from about a foot off the ground up to about 3 feet high. That is it. The coddling moth larvae overwinter in the bark crevices of the trunk. When they wake up and start to crawl up to the new buds in spring, they have to cross that band and the borax destroys them before they ever reach a leaf. One painting, one tree, pennies. This was written about in an old USDA Farmer's Bulletin from 1914, then quietly dropped from the new editions once the chemical companies arrived after the war. My father-in-law learned it from his father, who learned it from a bulletin clipped out and pinned to the inside of the smokehouse door in 1926. I have used it on my own 4 trees for 11 years. Last fall I cut into 40 apples to check. 38 of them, perfectly clean to the core, the other 2 a worm each. That is the kind of harvest the catalogs do not want you having for free. So, there it is. 11 uses for a $2 box of borax that the plain people have leaned on while the rest of the country has been quietly trained to spend hundreds every spring on bottles and bags and sprays that do less. You did not lose this knowledge by accident. It was simply not profitable for anyone to keep teaching it. But you are getting it back one cupboard staple at a time. And that is a small kind of freedom most folks have forgotten the taste of. If you are the kind of person who refuses to pay $40 for what $2 already does, you belong here. Tell me again down in the comments, what state are you in and what pest or problem are you fighting this year? I read everyone and I answer what I can, and sometimes your question becomes the next video. Hit subscribe if you want to keep recovering the plain, practical know-how that built this country before anyone tried to put a price tag on it. Next time, I'm going to show you what a single cup of plain wood ash from the wood stove does to the worst weed in any American lawn. There is one weed in particular that cannot survive it. I will tell you which one next time. Before I let you go, though, I want to circle back and put a few more honest tools in your hands, because I have been getting letters, real paper letters, some of them from folks in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Missouri, Tennessee, and one all the way from a farm outside Bozeman, Montana, asking me to go deeper on the borax itself, where it comes from, why it works, and why, if it is so simple, nobody at the county extension office seems to mention it anymore. So, let me sit with you a few minutes longer at this kitchen table and tell you the rest of what I know. Borax, the white powder in that $2 box under your sink, is sodium tetraborate. It is mined, not manufactured. The largest deposit in the United States sits in a town called Boron in Kern County, California, and that mine has been pulling the same mineral out of the ground since 1872. When a man named Francis Marion Smith, folks called him Borax Smith, started hauling it across the Mojave Desert with those 20-mule teams you have seen on the old soap boxes. That was not advertising fluff. Those teams were real. 20 mules, 2 wagons, and a water tank pulling 10 tons of borax at a stretch across 165 miles of open desert from Death Valley to the rail line at Mojave. For 6 years between 1883 and 1889, those teams never lost a single wagon. That is the kind of work that built the supply chain you are now buying from for $2.19 at the grocery store. And here is the part that matters for the garden. Borax, in small, measured doses, is a micronutrient. Boron, the element at the heart of it, is something every fruiting plant on your property actually needs in trace amounts to set blossoms properly. A tomato that drops its flowers, a pepper that will not fruit, an apple tree that blooms heavy in May, and then gives you a thin crop in September 9 times out of 10. In my experience, and in the experience of the old county agents who wrote bulletins in the 1930s and 40s, that is a boron deficiency in the soil. 1 level tablespoon of borax dissolved in 2 gallons of warm water, poured slow around the drip line of a mature fruit tree once every 3 years. Not every year, every 3 years will correct it. I learned that exact ratio from a United States Department of Agriculture pamphlet, Farmer's Bulletin number 1750, printed in 1935, back when the government still printed plain instructions for plain people. You can find scans of it online if you look. They do not hand those out at the garden center anymore. Now, I want to be straight with you because I am not in the business of selling you a miracle. Borax is a salt. Too much of it will burn a plant down to the roots and sterilize a patch of soil for 2 or 3 years running. That is exactly why the old-timers measured in spoons and not in cups. A teaspoon for ants, a tablespoon dissolved for a tree, 2 tablespoons mixed dry into a 5-gallon bucket of sand for the perimeter dust along a foundation. These are not approximate numbers. The woman who wrote that recipe on the smokehouse door in 1926, her name was Esther Yoder, and her granddaughter still farms 80 acres outside Millersburg, Ohio. She underlined the word level 3 times on that card. Level teaspoon, not heaping, not a pinch over. The old folks knew that the line between medicine and poison is almost always the dose, and they respected that line the way you respect a hot stove. I also want to address something I have heard from a few of you in the comments, and it is a fair question. Somebody wrote in last month and said, well, if borax is so safe, why does the box have a warning label on it now? And the answer is the one nobody likes to give, but it is true. Beginning around 2010, the European Chemicals Agency reclassified borates as a substance of concern for reproductive health at high industrial exposure levels, meaning if you worked in a mine and breathed the dust for 30 years, not if you put a teaspoon on an ant trail in your kitchen. The American labels followed the European ones because it is cheaper for a company to print one warning that covers every market than to print 2. So, the box looks scarier than it did in 1955, but the powder inside is the exact same mineral your grandmother washed her diapers with. Read the label, keep it away from children and pets the same way you would keep dish soap or vinegar away from them, and use the doses I have given you. That is the whole of it. One more thing, and then I will let you get back to your evening. A man named Elmer Stoltzfus, who farmed a 32-acre place outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania until he passed in 2019 at the age of 91, told me once that the difference between a garden that feeds a family and a garden that just frustrates, one comes down to about 6 decisions a year. When to plant, when to mulch, when to water deep instead of shallow, when to walk away and let the weather do its work, when to pull a plant that is not going to make it, and when to reach for the cupboard instead of the catalog. He said that last one cost him nothing for 58 growing seasons, and it fed 4 children, 19 grandchildren, and a fair number of neighbors who showed up at the back door in August with empty baskets and a sheepish look. That is what I am trying to pass along to you. Not a product, not a trick, a way of seeing your own pantry as the first place you look when something goes wrong out in the rows instead of the last. The catalog can wait. The garden center can wait. The $2 box has been sitting under the sink the whole time, patient as Sunday, doing the work nobody bothered to tell you it could still do. If this story changed the way you look at the simple staples in your cupboard, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history and wisdom they tried to bury. Let's plant the future together. The next treasure will be opened soon.